Justin Trudeau, or I say Pierre Poilievre, or Jagmeet Singh? What goes through your mind? Well, we got a survey from the folks at Angus Reid. Shows a lot of Canadians not so impressed with our political leaders. In fact, the numbers here are worse than we have seen in 50 years. Angus Reid, looking at the leaders of the Conservatives, Liberals, NDP, and their negative ratings. Pierre Poilievre sits at a minus 12% negative rating. Jagmeet Singh scoring a minus 14. And look at Justin Trudeau, the most unpopular by far, minus 38. The polling firm says while support for political leaders dips often and has done over the last 50 years since they've been tracking this kind of stuff, it has never been this bad for all three party leaders. So why? Let's bring in Lori Williams. She's standing by in Calgary. She's with Mount Royal University political analyst. Okay, let's start big picture. The takeaway when you saw this, surprised or not?
Not actually terribly surprised that it's at a low, because we were seeing a level of political discontent, frustration, even anger. We're seeing that sort of generally in our society, and it's been amplified on social media. This is a tough time to be a political leader in Canada. And the focus, obviously, of that anger is going to be on leaders. We've all seen the signs, particularly around Justin Trudeau, and sadly, that's something that has been tolerated, or at least not challenged by other leaders, as I think it ought to be. So that part of it isn't particularly surprising. What is surprising is that it doesn't look like voters see a particularly good alternative, and that could have an impact on voter turnout.
The other thing I'm curious about, if we can just drill down into Justin Trudeau. So this is a big problem. We know this. He's not doing well in the polls. His party's not doing well in the polls. They've got an election coming up in a little over a year from now. And when you start to see minus 38, a negative 38% favorability rating, I mean, what can you do, Lori, to try and turn that around?
I think it's very difficult for two reasons. One, of course, we have that difficulty that all leaders have, or parties, if they've been in power. When you get close to that 10-year mark, you may start out with a lot of optimism, a lot of possibilities, people buying into your vision, but over time, you tend to lose political capital, and it's pretty tough to get that back. So it's not impossible. We've seen things like that before. I suppose the silver lining in this, for perhaps all three leaders, but particularly for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, is that the unfavorability is pretty bad for the other leaders as well. But again, that's a bigger problem typically for the NDP and for the Liberals than it is for the Conservatives, because if people don't like the negativity that's going on, they tend to just want to stay home. They don't see a viable alternative. They don't participate. That isn't as big a liability for the stronger, if you like, more loyal Conservative base. That's not as big a problem for them in terms of keeping their base, but it is a problem in terms of them appealing to those swing voters, those folks that are on the fence, that if they don't see a credible alternative, they're not going to vote for whoever they voted last time, but they're not going to vote for the Conservatives either.
What does it mean for Pierre Poilievre? And we're going to bring those numbers up again if we can, just to give people a sense of where he stands. He actually is, quote, the most popular, quote unquote, only minus 12 favorability.
Right, and that's pretty close to where Jagmeet Singh is sitting, potentially even within the margin of error. So I don't know that there's a lot of positive to gain from this. But again, for Pierre Poilievre, he has to look at this and think about, well, what's the best strategy going forward? How can he win over those swing voters? How can he motivate them to come out and vote when this negativity around politics and around political leaders tends to disincentivize voting behavior?
Your thoughts for Poilievre, because again, he is considered the alternative to Justin Trudeau. If the election becomes a referendum about Justin Trudeau, you pointed it out, after 10 years in power, it's a hard climb for him. There are some people who are very turned off by Pierre Poilievre, though, Lori, and his, demeanor, his persona, things that he says and he does. But maybe they dislike Trudeau enough that they will hold their nose and vote for Pierre Poilievre.
Well, what we're seeing, I think, right now is a snapshot of mostly a focus on the government. And of course, the government and the government leader is going to have the most difficulty generating support because of that. But at some point, as more and more people turn to the alternatives, and perhaps don't like what they see there, that could have consequences that are worse for Pierre Poilievre. So many of us have been saying for a long time now, Pierre Poilievre needs to go beyond criticizing Justin Trudeau and the Liberals and move toward providing alternatives, look like a government in waiting, present a vision that Canadians can be enthused or motivated by. That's the way to get those voters out to vote for you. The problem for Pierre Poilievre is that as they look more closely at him and they see that negativity, that makes it a harder climb for Pierre Poilievre. So again, I think this is a snapshot that's primarily focused on the government and on the Prime Minister. As people start to turn their attention to what the alternatives are, that's when things get more difficult for Pierre Poilievre.
Hey, Laurie, always a pleasure. Thanks for taking the time to go through these poll numbers. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.